Thank you. I welcome the opportunity to address Dáil Éireann today on the Central Bank National Claims Information Database bill, which was published on Tuesday, 10th of July 18. The bill seeks to provide the legislative basis for the Central Bank of Ireland to establish and maintain the National Claims Information Database, which was recommended by the Cost of Insurance Working Group in 2017. Its essential purpose is to improve data availability in the motor insurance area. One of the key themes which emerged from the discussion of the working group was the improvement in transparency through the additional collection and publication of data. This was something which the Joint Oireachtas Committee also called for in its own report on the rising cost of motor insurance. The working group found that there are a number of factors that influence the cost of insurance premium, and it's not always clear what is the main factor at a particular point and time. Therefore, in order for policymakers to have a better understanding of the causes of any future peaks and troughs in pricing, it is essential to have reliable and regular information on the key factors causing such volatility, in particular some insight into the different component costs of providing insurance. The availability of this type of information should provide both policymakers and insurers with a better understanding of what triggers market distortions, thus enabling them to respond more appropriately. Examples of the areas that the database will cast greater light upon include legal costs and settlement channels. Therefore, because of this need for the transparency, the concept of a National Claims Information Database to be established and maintained by the Central Bank of Ireland was put forward, and a subgroup of the Cost of Insurance Working Group was charged with driving its development. That subgroup, chaired by officials from the Department of Finance, included representatives from the Central Bank of Ireland, State Claims Agency, the Personal Injuries Assessment Board, the State Statistics Office and the Society of Actuaries of Ireland. The subgroup worked from the objectives set out in the Working Group report to identify relevant data that could be defined in a consistent manner and devise a practical method for the collection of that data. Earlier in the summer, this work culminated in the publication of the bill before the House today. In parallel, work had been undertaken by the Central Bank in close cooperation with the data subgroup on the finalisation, subject to the passage of this legislation, of a specification document which sets out the specific data that will be required from insurers for the purpose of the database. The progression of the specification, in parallel with the drafting of the bill, was seen as necessary to ensure that the database can be operational as quickly as possible following enactment. It also provided a means of signalling to industry certain system changes that may need to undertake to be ready for engagement with the database. I might add, by way of further context, that as a short-term measure prior to the establishment of the National Claims Information Database, on foot of another recommendation of the Working Group, based on data collected from insurers on a voluntary basis, the Department has also been publishing key information metrics in relation to motor insurance. These metrics include certain ultimate claims costs which have never been collected on an industry-wide basis prior to this. The logistics of the process in terms of collection verification and definitional alignment amongst companies has reinforced the importance of establishing the National Claims Information Database on a statutory footing. I now propose to go through an overview of the operation of the bill and each of its 14 sections. Sections 1 to 3 are the scope of the bill. The first 3 sections of the bill set out a number of definitions to clearly outline the scope of the database in terms of the types of claims in respect of which information can be collected. Section 4 of the bill is the standard interpretation section. It defines a range of relevant expressions. Importantly, it sets out the different settlement channels through which a claim may be finalised. For instance, a claim may be resolved directly with an insurer, through PIAB or by a court decision. As aggregate industry data is not currently available, for example, on the direct settlements, this breakdown was identified as important to allow policymakers to see trends or distinctions in the costs related to these channels and to enable them to develop more targeted response measures where necessary. Section 5 is the standard section to allow for the expenses associated with the administration of the bill. met from the money supplied by the Oireachtas. While it is intended in Section 6, while it is intended in the first instance that the database will focus on the motor insurance sector, it is clear from our consultations that many saw a case to extend the scope of the database in the future to encompass other lines of non-life insurance, like employer liability insurance and public liability insurance. Section 6 of the bill allows for this extension of the scope to other classes of non-life insurance in the future on footing of an assessment by the Central Bank of Ireland of the appropriateness of such extension after consultation with the Minister for Finance. Section 7 allows the Central Bank to make regulations setting out the exact terms on which a claim is considered to be within the state. The need for this definition is because of the fact that the scope of the bill focuses on claims relating to risks in the state only. Section 8 confers the Central Bank of Ireland with the function of establishing and administering the database. Section 2 requires the Central Bank of Ireland to collect and analyse data from insurance undertakings on the income costs associated with carrying on the relevant class of insurance. The Central Bank of Ireland is then required to publish information about that data at least annually. Subsection 4 elaborates on the specific information which can be collected by the Central Bank in execution of this function. For example, information can be collected on different types of income, exposure, business expense, the number and nature of claims, the costs and provisions associated with those claims, as well as the amounts paid in respect of claims resolved in different settlement channels and the costs associated with those claims. There is also scope to collect details relating to large claims in particular. Subsections 6 to 9 deal with the reporting of information that is collected from insurance undertakings. In particular, subsection 7 sets out the purposes which the reports should try to meet. These include increasing the level of information around the relationship between the costs of providing insurance and the cost of a premium for the consumer, identifying current and emerging trends within the sector, identifying the factors that cause price movements in the relevant line of insurance, presenting a statistical analysis of income and expenditure associated with providing the relevant type of insurance, and presenting a statistical analysis of information relating to claims and of each particular settlement channel used in respect of such claims. Section 9 of the bill makes it a prescribed contravention under the Central Bank Act 1942 for someone to fail to comply with the requirements in the aforementioned Section 8 and Section 12, which relates to the sharing of data, which I will turn to in a moment. Section 10 provides the Central Bank with the authority to require, by written notice, the provision of information specified in the notice. This is to be achieved by an amendment of Section 22 of the Central Bank Supervision and Enforcement Act 2013, which contains much of the Central Bank's information gathering powers. Section 11 of the bill sets out the funding regime for the establishment and administration of the database. The working group recognised that there would be resourcing implications to be addressed as part of the implementation of the database, including an arrangement for financing that ensures that the Central Bank is fully reimbursed for the performance of this additional function. One of the reasons for this is to ensure that the financing of the project does not run contrary to the prohibitions on monetary financing set down by the European Central Bank statutes. As such, the Central Bank is provided in Section 11.2 with the capacity to levy insurance undertakings for the execution of its functions under Section 8, such as the establishment and administration of the database and the publication of reports. Subsection 3 provides a funding backstop where, notwithstanding the levies being in place, there is insufficient money to meet its costs, or where the bank apprehends that it is not able to meet its costs from the levies raised. Where this is the case, the bank may write to the Minister for Finance to request funding from the Central Fund. The Minister under subsection 4 has the authority to attach such terms to the payment of monies as he may determine after consulting with the Central Bank. In particular, these terms may relate to repayments and interest. Under Section 12.1, the Central Bank may provide data which it collects under Section 8 to any person on request. Subsections 2 and 3 that set out conditions where data cannot be shared. Subsections 2 prohibits the sharing of data where a person or insurer is identifiable from the data. Subsection 3 prohibits the sharing of data where the Central Bank considers that there are exceptional circumstances, including where the provision of the data would be seriously prejudicial to the legitimate interest of consumers or of any company or other undertaking. The data would not be likely to be of value as it is not complete or sufficiently verified. Subsection 4 of this section allows the Central Bank to attach conditions to its provision of data. Sections 13 and 14, the final two sections of the bill, are standard provisions that allow for the making of regulations under the bill and the commencement of the bill in whole or in part as such at times are deemed appropriate by the Minister for Finance. As those following the progress of the bill to date may be aware, the Minister for Finance committee in January to request a determination on whether or not pre-led scrutiny was appropriate in this case. The Minister was advised on the 7th of February that pre-led scrutiny would not be undertaken. As Minister with responsibility for insurance matters, I welcome this and also the assurance of the committee at that time that it would fully engage with the Department in the context of the legislative process. Deputies will be aware that in order to implement a number of the recommendations made in the Cost of Insurance Working Group, there is a requirement to amend legislation. Specifically, I am referring to recommendations 6 and 14 of the Working Group report on cost of employer and public liability, addressed by my colleague Minister Flanagan. Recommendation 6 seeks to amend Section 8 of the Civil Liability in Court Act 2004 to ensure that defendants are notified of a claim lodged against them at an earlier date than currently required. Recommendation 14 seeks to amend Section 14 of the same Act to allow for the Court to draw inferences from non-compliance with the requirement to lodge the verifying affidavit within 21 days after the lodgement of the service of the pleading concerned. These are key recommendations, and it is important that they are implemented as soon as possible. Consequently, I am currently discussing this matter with the Minister for Justice and Equality to seek his agreement to request the Government to approve the introduction of a small package of amendments to Sections 8 and 14 of the Civil Liability and Court Act 2004 at committee stage of this bill. I think that, subject to these discussions and any subsequent governmental approval, the inclusion and subsequent adoption of these amendments through legislation would allow for a significant reform of the insurance sector. I will keep members of the House informed of any developments. I would like to reiterate the importance of the swift passage of this bill to ensure that the National Claims Information Database can be established and the Central Bank of Ireland can begin collecting and analysing the data necessary to increase transparency in the insurance sector as soon as possible. Doing so will add to the various measures that this government has been putting in place to address concerns regarding the cost of insurance. Just to conclude, last Corla, I would like to thank the members of the Oireachtas and the Finance Committee in particular who facilitated the Insurance Amendment Bill prior to the closure before the summer. This bill is equally as important to try and grapple with the cost of insurance. The cost of insurance is doing far too much damage to too many people, too many businesses around the country. I would hope and I would also anticipate if we could move this through both houses as quickly as possible. The pre-led scrutiny is not required. We are expecting an imminent response from the European Central Bank in relation to the Central Bank of Ireland role in this, and certainly I would like to think we could conclude this in a matter of weeks, if at all possible, because this is another very important piece in our armoury to bring down the cost of insurance premium, in not just in motor insurance but also in employers' liability and public liability. Thank you very much.